Wars fans, and welcome back to AniTheory. We're going to cover one of what I believe is one of the greatest mysteries of the Animorphs series, and it involves an alien race that we never meet, never see, never hear from. It's the Anati. Now, who, you might ask, are the Anati? Well, they became somewhat of a major player in the background of the Animorphs series, and it all started here in Visser. This is how the Anati were introduced. They kept me waiting for almost an hour. I could only imagine what was happening among the 13. Maybe they were dealing with some entirely unrelated matter. Perhaps the strange disappearance of the task force that had been sent to investigate the Anati planet. So we're immediately thrust into a mystery out of left field. Now, the context for this is Visser 1 and Visser 3 are having some weird joint trial, which is basically the whole plot of Visser. And the Council of 13 are having a delay, and so Visser 1 ponders maybe there's a delay because they're wondering what to do about what's just happened with the Anati homeworld, wherein a Yeerk task force, which probably means multiple ships, have gone to the Anati system. By the way, it does use system and planet almost interchangeably, so we can just assume that the Anati system is the locality around one central planet where a sentient life form is, the Anati. We can assume that this task force of many Yeerk ships just vanished. That's all we ever hear about that, but it's also the first time we hear about the Anati in the Anati system. Now, the Anati are brought up again in this book, but in very different circumstances. The Andalites have at long last become fully aware of the situation on Earth. They are assembling a massive fleet in orbit around their home world. It will be ready to launch within months. Target uncertain. Not Earth. Earth. Or the Anati world. It will depend on which they decide is more important. But as you know, Visser 3, the Andalites are slow to commit. A sudden, violent war on Earth would be sure to draw them in. Do you have the forces to fight a full Andalite fleet containing 30 of their dome ships, Visser 3? This mostly comes from Garoth, in fact, pretty much only from Garoth. But he talks about how the Andalites are setting up for a new onslaught, but there's two primary targets, and it's got to be either Earth or the Anati planet. At the end of Visser, it's decided that as punishment, Visser 1 or Idris basically just gets reassigned. So her and her host body, Eva, are sent to the Anati world. Visser 1, we wish the Andalites to attack us in the Anati system, but not immediately. The planet in question is ringed by numerous moons and large asteroids that will allow us to place Dracon cannon. Cannon are easier to come by than ships. I don't understand, I said. Are you ordering me? You are too valuable to dispose of just yet. You remain the most successful military officer in the Empire, despite your illegal and troubling methods. You are ordered to proceed immediately to the Anati system and take over the subjugation of her sentient race or races, and prepare to resist an Andalite attack. Succeed, and you will live. Fail us, Visser 1, and the sentence of death will be carried out. That is the decision of the Council. So this is all that we got laid out in Visser. So to summarise the Anati stuff in Visser, a task force was sent to the Anati planet but mysteriously vanished. It's then decided that the Anati system is going to be a decoy Yeerk invasion, so the Andalites are hoovered up into that system rather than Earth. However, they still want to subjugate the race or races of the Anati system. So it becomes clear to me that the Yeerks, this task force that disappeared, was probably the first time they've ever actually gone to the Anati system / planet. And so they're not actually quite sure what's on the planet's surface. Why else would he say race or sentient race or races, as if he didn't know how many sentient races there were, whether there was just one or multiple. So you can presume that there's one at least. At least. This is all very strange, and this is why I say it's a big mystery. Because the Yeerks clearly don't really know what's there. The Andalites clearly don't know what's there, and yet somehow this is the focus. As if the Anati system in itself is an incredibly important asset. But we're never told what the asset is. Maybe it's rich in some form of mineral or metal that is required by spaceships, or maybe it's rich in whatever oil or petroleum the ships require for doing what they need to do. Or maybe the race itself has advanced technologies. We simply don't know. What makes this even more of a mystery is the fact that further things happen. So we're done with Visser now. Before we go too far ahead, I just want to clear up something. Because there's this quote from book 38, The Arrival, roughly 2 books later after Visser, so a short time later. Arbat stepped forward and spoke. He was an older Andalite. Much of his blue fur was tanned. After the unexpected victory on Lyra, major elements of the fleet were ordered to Earth, but it was diverted to the Rakum-Guru conflict in the Nine Sifter system. Originally, I thought that the Rakum-Guru conflict would be something associated with the Anati system, because going back to the quotes from Visser, Garoth said that the Andalites were reforming with hopes of going to either the Anati or Earth. One of 2 directions, and that would be decided by Visser 1, who had set up with the Anati system and dragged the Andalites in. So my first thought is, well, the Rakum-Guru conflict must have been what happened there. That must have been what Visser 1 set up and dragged the Andalites away. However, there's a couple of points here. I think that if the Rakum-Guru conflict was something to do with the Anati, I think the Anati would be mentioned, because the Anati are not just mentioned in Visser, they're mentioned in multiple books. So why Anati would not be used here is one thing. But also, he says, after the victory on Lyra. So how many books have we had since Lyra? It's probably been between 1 or 2 years since book 18, roughly. So after Lyra, what I'm thinking is the Andalites came back and they knew what was going on Earth and they were going to go there, but this Rakum-Guru thing happened, so they went to go do that. That took up a large portion of time. They finished that, come back to the Andalite homeworld, and that's when we get Garoth saying we know that they're reforming just outside the Andalite planet, and they can either go to Anati or Earth. So I think that the Rakum-Guru thing is a separate incident that happened between book 18 and Visser. So in that 15 or so book space. That's what I think. I can't be exactly sure. What's the next time we get clues of what happens with the Anati in Visser 1? It's book 45. So Axe has built this Z-Space transponder with help from Marco's dad, where they listen in to calls, and they can also call the Andalites and whatever have you. And so they do. Over the transmissions that they intercept, they find out that Visser 1 is back on Earth. Axe, what have you heard? Jake said. There is one thing, Axe began. One very disturbing conclusion that I can draw, though with limited certainty. Axe looked at me. Visser 1 has returned to Earth, but for a grim purpose. She is being held at the Yeerk pool. She is to be executed as a traitor. Visser 1 has come back to Earth, and we're roughly, so Visser sort of takes place between, well, it does take place between 35 and 36, so let's just for argument's sake say it's book 35. We're now book 45, so that's a 10-book span. So I'm yet to do my Animorphs timeline, but I'm just going to speculate that's somewhere like a year, or maybe a bit less. So a bit more, a bit less than a year. So that's how long Visser 1, Idris, went up to the Anati system, sodded it up, and then got taken back down to Earth, where Visser 3 would take charge of executing her. and there had to be a Council of 13 member present, as I believe in this quote it says. From what I understand, Axe continued, death as a traitor means death by Kandrona starvation. The event awaits only the necessary witness from the Council of 13, who will arrive in 2 days. Visser 3 will then be elevated to the post of Visser 1. And, Axe added, there are rumours, nothing concrete, but suggestions, that the execution of Visser 1 is part of an overall change affecting Earth. I knew what that meant. We all did. Visser 1, originator of the Yeerk invasion of Earth, favoured a slow infiltration of Earth, a quiet, stealthy assault. But Visser 3, a jumped-up egomaniac, had pushed for all-out conquest from the beginning. His dearest dream is to annihilate human power centres in an Independence Day-style war, to drive large numbers of humans into infestation camps, to do it quickly and publicly. The Council of 13 had come to the decision that Visser 1 would be executed if she failed to do her duty on the Anati planet or within the Anati system. What that means now is the very thing that they were worried about in Visser that came up there, that Visser 1 would take over and that his tactic of full-scale war would take place. So whatever happened with the Anati planet, at the very least, meant that the Yeerk's focus on Earth changed, their plans changed, and they went for the more all-out war route, which would eventually lead to their defeat. But how did Visser 1 fail? Now, this is another big mystery. The second of two big mysteries for the Anati planet. Because, well, let's see what Eva... Because they've rescued Eva, they've got Eva, and they managed to, in book 46, The Deception, managed to get in contact with the Andalite military. And they tell the Andalite military what's happened, to a degree, with the Anati system. This is the Resistance. Yes, and what is it you want? How is it you're communicating with us? Rachel snorted. Jake shot a look at her before speaking. Look, he said, we don't have much time here. This transmission could be tracked, and we have a lot to talk about. First, the Anati world situation, it's a trap. The Yeerks have constructed huge Dracon cannon sites on all the moons. Your fleet goes there, it's obliterated. There was a moment of silence. An understandable delay given the enormous distance over which we were transmitting and the primitiveness of our transmitting device, but I suspected the silence meant something else. We know of your situation on Earth, human. The voice belonged to another Andalite. Its tone suggested an officer superior to the one with whom Jake had just spoken. Yes, Jake began, but things have changed. We know you are in need of our assistance. Rude, Marco mumbled. Let a guy finish his sentence. The voice went on, cold and imperious. An Andalite's voice. And we must consider the possibility that you would lie to us in an effort to become our top priority. This is Aximili Esgruth Isthil, I said. What my prince says is correct. Our source for the information regarding the Anati planet comes from none other than Visser 1, originator of the Yeerk invasion on this planet. Visser 1 was sent to build the Anati defences and draw the Andalite fleet. Recently, the Visser returned to Earth. We eliminated the Yeerk and liberated the host. This is the truth. Eva has confided in the Animorphs that they had indeed built the Dracon cannons around the Anati homeworld on the moons, the many moons that surround it. So she didn't fail in that mission. We never get told what exactly she failed on, but it seems to me that she was partly successful because there is still the danger that the Andalites are distracted by the Anati system and they go there and they get hit by the Dracon cannons that are placed on these moons, and it said pretty much that in this book, The Deception. If the Andalite fleet had chosen to ignore our warning and had moved to the Anati system, one of the new Visser 1's conditions for an all-out war had been met. We were in a situation of maximum danger. So around the Anati moon there are these many Dracon cannons, and the Animorphs and Axe fear that their warnings would be ignored and the Andalites would go to the Anati system. Meanwhile, the Yeerks are pushing forward with Earth. And we realise by the end of the series that, in fact, the Yeerk military, the Yeerk Empire, was basically now concentrating on Earth. The High Command has met and made their decision, If the Yeerks are indeed concentrating on the planet Earth, we must allow their plan to continue. Once the bulk of the Yeerk race has been transported, the planet can be quarantined. So these are all the details that we have to work with now. And there's quite a lot, and there's so many little mysteries thrown in there. This is why I find it so fascinating, the Anati thing. We never see them, and yet they've done so much. So let's just cover the basics. The Yeerks tried to subjugate them, but seemingly failed. Because of that failure, they retreated from the Anati world and simply left it as a decoy for the Andalites to be drawn into. The Yeerks then retreated basically the whole military operation to Earth, which allowed their defeat. So whatever happened with the Anati homeworld was, I think, a major stepping stone to the eventual annihilation of the Yeerk Empire. Because they were clearly trying to push forward with a new invasion, trying to do 2 invasions at once, which, requires a lot of resources and, for want of a better word, manpower, alien power. And that obviously failed. Visser was executed, and then all their efforts became a defensive, basically a rushed invasion on Earth. They changed plan and said, right, we need to get it as quick as possible, we need to get this planet. But they focused there, even knowing that that was probably a good thing for the Andalites because of their usual cluster and bomb technique that they use multiple times. So the Yeerks went from a pretty powerful position back in 35 sort of time with Visser, where they were working on multiple invasions, to suddenly, about 10 books later, focusing on a rushed invasion on a single planet. So something between 35 and 45 was vastly detrimental to the Yeerk Empire. What's the only thing we know outside of Earth? The Anati world. So whatever happened on Anati was a major military bugger up. And that is most likely why Visser 1 is being executed. She gets sent off to the Anati world. They say, build a bunch of Dracon cannons on the moons to act as a trap for the Andalites, but we also want you to subjugate the sentient race or races. She accomplished one of those tasks. There were Dracon cannons placed on the moon, yet she was to be executed merely 10 books after being sent off to the Anati world, which can mean only one thing. She failed in her mission to subjugate the sentient race or races on the planet, and that would have been why she was executed. That's a big mystery now. What are the Anati? Well, we will discover or talk about this more when we come to the Anati analysis, but we're in AniTheory now, so it's basically... we've basically covered most of what we need to cover, and largely I'll be leaving it to you, the audience. But I just do find it so fascinating, because this clearly was a major brick in the wall of the Yeerk's defeat. But we never see it. There needs to be some form of the Anati Chronicles thrown in there. But spoiler alert, I'm writing fan fiction. Well, my next book that I'm going to write is Animorphs number 65. And I think we'll learn quite a lot in that one. Hint, hint. My AniTheory, at this current point in time, is that whoever the sentient race were on the Anati planet, for sake of argument, called the Anati. The Anati were a highly advanced race, or hardly problematic for the Yeerks to invade. So Visser 1 gets sent along with the Council of 13 knowing that her tactic is usually a slow, ponderous invasion rather than Visser 3's brutal invasion. So why they wouldn't expect her to do the same on this planet, I'm not sure. But perhaps it was too slow for their liking. Perhaps she just tried again to an isolated invasion and spread from there. But who knows, maybe by that time the Andalite fleet was finally moving, and the Council of 13 thought, right, we're on borrowed time here, we need to get this cracking. And maybe it just did not work. Maybe the Anati became aware very quickly. We don't know who the Anati are. Maybe they're very clever. And they very quickly realised, hold on a minute, there's a freaking slug parasite race invading our planet. And they boot the Yeerks out. They say they get rid of them. That's what would cause Visser 1 to be executed. A simple bugger up like that. And so what happens then is that they rely solely on the Dracon cannons to draw the Andalites in, which would only last so long, surely, because if there was no actual invasion on the planet, then how long would the Andalites be fooled by a bunch of Dracon cannons on the planet? Surely it wouldn't take long. So either they weren't interested at all and they headed straight for Earth, hence we get what we get in book 54, or they found out quickly and then made a dash for Earth with the majority of their force, the vast majority of their force, still intact. It's anyone's guess, really. All we can say is that whatever happened with the Anati had major implications. It caused the execution, or the death of Visser 1, the promotion of Esplin to the post of Visser 1, which caused the all-out war scenario, which basically caused everything that happened afterwards. The Animorphs series would not have ended the same were it not for the Anati world playing a major role. What about the Yeerk task force? I mean, why would the Yeerks want to go to this place as a trap when it's very clear that there are dangers to them? I do reckon that the sentient race, the Anati, are highly advanced, but also very secretive. Sort of like North Korea style, you know, they keep to themselves and they don't allow much information out. So as soon as the Yeerks crossed that threshold, they got taken in, and nobody ever heard from them again. And maybe that's why Visser 1 failed, because she went there and she saw them. She was like, wow, this lot are not fun. And she just held off for too long, thinking, how do I tackle this group? To the point where the Council of 13 just said, nah, this ain't working. And that's why they had to just install the Dracon cannons on the moons rather than the planet itself, because they couldn't set foot on the planet. They had to just work on the outside of the planet's main atmosphere. See what I mean? Having to work on the asteroids and moons around the planet rather than the planet itself, which would seem to be the major goal here. But they didn't. They never, as far as I'm concerned, and my speculation is, they never set foot, or at least they never set foot and made it off again. That's what I think. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Eventually we will do an Anati analysis, and that should be fun, because I really like this species. There's just so much mystery to them, so much mystery. And I'll be addressing a lot of that mystery in my next fan fiction. Not all of it, you know, got to leave some there for nibbling on, but I'm looking to introduce the Anati and discuss a bit of backstory about them in Animorphs 65, The Isolated. Looking forward to it. Right, this has been another AniTheory. Let me know what you think, and I shall see you somewhere else in the Animorphs universe. Ta-ra!